Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Peter Rutzler. The first silverware has been handed out in French football, but who lifted the Coupe de la Ligue trophy and who drowned their sorrows by downing as many Easter eggs as they could? All that and the Ligue 1 weekend too after the latest headlines. Paris Saint-Germain sealed the first trophy of the season as they beat Monaco 3-0 in the Coupe de la Ligue final. The victory didn't come without some controversy, with a Radamel Falcao goal being ruled out for offside, with the Parisians 2 up, even with the aid of VAR. But Edison Cavani brace either side of an Angel Di Maria finish ensured the first part of a potential domestic trouble was at the back. In Ligue 1, Marseille came through a tricky away tie against Dijon with a 3-1 win. The home side were reduced to 10 men late on as Cedric Yambare saw red, but L'OM will be sweating over the fitness of Steve Mandanda ahead of the Europa League clash with RB Leipzig on Thursday as he missed part of the game. Sunday's early match saw Guingamp end a run of 6 winless matches as Clément Grenier scored a beautiful free kick in their 2-1 win against Bordeaux, as the special Sunday multiplex was headlined by an enormous 1-0 win for Amiens at a very quiet Lille, obviously playing behind closed doors, plunging their hopes plunging them at least further in the mire, with Christophe Galtier even questioning his own future with the club. Elsewhere, Saint-Etienne are now unbeaten in 9 as they won 3-0 away at Nantes, with Ligue now just 3 points off that 5th position. That place is currently being held by Montpellier, who beat Caen 3-1, which allowed them to leapfrog Rennes, who play on Wednesday against Monaco. Strasbourg and Metz shared the points, goals and red cards as their 2-2 draw finished with 10 men a side in the derby, while Troyes continued to tread water as an Alassane player double helped Nice to a victory at the Stade de l'Aube. In the final match of the weekend, Lyon maintained their pressure on third place as they ran out 2-0 winners against Toulouse. 2 Memphis Depay goals gave them a comfortable lead, but Les Gones still gave their fans a few scary moments in the second half before victory was assured. And that's all for your news. But for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. Start this week with the set piece event at the Matmut Atlantique, where PSG flexed their muscles once again, Peter. It was a pretty interesting game, but it did end up being very one-sided in a way. Were they just too good on the day for the Monegasque to handle?
Definitely on the one side. I think we saw PSG at their best. Showing what they can offer and stepping up on the big occasion to add yet another Coupe de la Ligue title. I think that's 5 in a row now. So it's definitely their trophy. I think, it's partly to do with how good PSG were and especially how good Kylian Mbappe was as well, which is really promising for France going towards the World Cup, his recent form. But also there are some questions to be asked of the way Monaco set up. Why, for instance, Jardim decided to switch Ronnie Lopez and Lamar to what we would probably term as their unfamiliar flanks. But I think in general, it would probably do a disservice to overlook the fact that PSG are that much better than Monaco this season. And especially compared to last. We talked about all season of how Monaco have been through transition, and while Monaco have been in excellent league form and have looked to really establish themselves as the staple second place side, it was a bit. I think we could see the golfing class last night. There were players who have had somewhat quiet seasons, like Julian Draxler, who really did perform. Monaco could have probably tested them a little bit more, and I think obviously the early goal was key. But I think in general we're looking at PSG showing that they are at that level above this year, and they were fully deserving on the night. They were excellent going forward, especially for Mbappe down that right hand side.
And that's the funny thing with Cavani obviously scoring the 2 goals. He maybe takes the headlines, but the real man of the match, really, and I think it was pretty clear, was Kylian Mbappe, and he was tremendous in a big part of all 3 goals. He went on that wonderful mazy run for the first goal that rightfully was given eventually as a penalty. They were sort of debating whether the free that foul by Glick came before the quote unquote pass to Rabiot that obviously the midfielder was offside, but it was a terrific little bit of a run. And the same for the second one. He does that little burst of pace, that sort of frightening aspect of him. He's almost like a cheetah where he sort of accelerates unbelievably. And that sort of first 10 yards, he just absolutely obliterated the Monaco midfield with one sudden burst and then an unbelievable little ball to Di Maria to finish. And then was a little bit of a part of that final goal for Cavani to seal things. Had a couple of chances himself, a good save from Subasic to really stop him as well. But he was absolutely excellent on the evening and showed exactly why he's such a big player and what he seems to really love playing against Monaco, which I'm really pleases their fans and his former teammates that he seems to really get up for the games against themselves and show his qualities as well. But yeah, he was by far and away, I think, the best player on a night where PSG just looked pretty comfortable for a lot of it. And in the end, Peter, they'll be very delighted to get that result out of the way because, as we mentioned that in the news, that they are now on for that domestic treble. And this was probably, out of the 3, the big question mark, having to face Monaco, obviously, in the final. The league looks like it's almost wrapped up. That can be won in the next couple of games. And obviously with the Coupe de France, they've got a relatively winnable tie, you may say, in the next round, and then if they get through that tie in the semi-finals, they'll face a national side in the final. So there's a great chance there, really, undeniably, to win that. So although it does look like Unai Emery's last season, it'll be a positive point for them that it looks like at least the domestic side of things will be wrapped up for them now.
Yeah, I think the Coupe de la Ligue has essentially confirmed the treble. I think it'd be one hell of a shock if one of the national sides can upset the apple cart or Les Herbiers or Chambly. I mean, that would be a bit of breath of fresh air for sure from the PSG domestic dominance. But yeah, they're all set for that treble that we pretty much predicted at the start of the season. I think the only uncertainty for them was how well they would do in Europe, and it hasn't worked out. Obviously, there's talk of Thomas Tuchel coming in, which is just screams of it being another manager to come in and will be gone in a year and a half. I'm pretty sure. But I think from Monaco's perspective, it's a trophyless season. I think Vasiliev was asked this afterwards, and I don't think they can be overly disappointed with how the game panned out. And while of course it's a final and anything can happen, you are playing a really good Paris Saint-Germain side, and I think when we talk about the questions really that can be asked of them on the night, I think playing Raji at fullback was definitely one. I think it was quite interesting in the other game between these two in the league. I think it's 2-1. They've still got to play each other, if I'm not mistaken. Raji had a wretched game. I mean, it was part of a back 3, and it was a bit unusual. And Jardine didn't want to test that again. But it's when you're playing someone like Mbappe, who's one of his strongest assets is his pace and his ability to go beyond people. He's an extremely fast thinker. He's one step ahead all of the time. And I think it was like the second minute and Mbappe's just let fly down that right-hand side and just left him for dust. It was just, you just knew what was going to happen for the rest of the game. And I think it was also the part that it was quite negative in that when the way that he set up Jardim with Ronnie Lopez on the left, cutting in onto the right, and then Lamar on the right, cutting into the left. I think that's the idea. It meant that on that left-hand side, where they could have been more effective, they had sort of a blunt instrument. I mean, it wasn't dreadful going forward, Raji. I mean, we always seem to, he is one to go to when they have a defeat, isn't he? But, he doesn't offer that pace or that excitement to really test Dani Alves, who, to be honest, is, he's a bit past it. I think he's treating PSG a little bit like a retirement home in a way. in that, he's been good, but it's we saw in Europe and we've seen at different times throughout the season. You think to lose against Gradel and so forth, and you think that he's one to be tested. This is a PSG side that can be got at, and we didn't really see that. And I think in midfield too, which was the other side of the coin, was Tielemans had his chance in the middle at the top of the triangle, which we've been calling for because that's where he played at Anderlecht. But he had a couple of snapshots, didn't he, in the first half that went over the bar, which you think, from what he's capable of, you should be testing trapping goal. So I think of course, behind him with Moutinho and Fabinho, whilst they were okay, I think the two of them didn't really hold midfield in the way that I think Jardim would have wanted. Of course, they're chasing the game, but I don't know what you thought of the way Jardim set up, especially in midfield as well.
It was frustrating for me, really, in all honesty. I felt that Monaco were maybe a little bit too risk adverse in a game that, in the end, really, we mentioned this in the preview show on Thursday, that is their season now. Obviously, the Champions League is gone. There was no Europa League after that. There was the title's gone. They've got pretty much second signed, sealed, and delivered. The Coupe de France has gone out of their grasp. So this was really a chance for them to at least win something to finish the season. And it felt like with the momentum that they'd built over the sort of last couple of months, they've only lost one game since December in all competitions. You have to think, or 2 games, sorry, and it was a Champions League game against Porto and the Coupe de France match against Lyon, which shows you how excellent they've been in the last several months and how much they've grown as a team. But this just felt like they were a little bit tentative, a little bit. And in fairness to them, they did go down early. The early goal really didn't help at all. They weren't quite solid enough in midfield, I thought. But at the same time, they were lucky. Ronnie Lopez has that great chance as well where he tries to dink it over Kevin Trapp, and he's been terrific recently, and it just goes a little bit wide. I felt Jovetic has got to be disappointed that he didn't get a start. We talked about him a few times in the last couple of weeks. He's really been in great form. You have to think that he had it in the back of his mind, Jardim, of risking it and going for a 4-4-2 with Jovetic and Falcao and giving it a real go. But that never really seemed to materialise. Maybe play Fabinho and Tielemans together and just go for it. Although Moutinho did play relatively well, really, from a deeper role. But yeah, it just felt like a missed opportunity in the end of things. And at the same time that you will also wind back, and many people will really, to the strange sort of controversial moment in this game. And I want to get your thoughts on it as well, Peter. Is that, well, strange decision that obviously Falcao's goal, it was 2-0 at the time. It was about 35 minutes in, and Falcao scores a goal at the near post. Now, replays show you that at one angle, when you're looking at it at real time and at a slight angle, it looks genuinely like he's offside. But you look at the angle down the line, and I think he's behind the ball, but many are saying at least level with the ball as Ronnie Lopez cuts it into the box, which would be onside under the rules. And it seems a strange one that they've not quite picked that up. I don't quite understand how they've missed that one, really, Peter. The only thing I can think of is they weren't paying attention to that part of the rule and were focusing maybe on him and the last man. And he, in that regard, he is maybe just about offside. But unfortunately, the letter of the law was that he really was onside for that goal and could have been at that time, potentially, when Monaco were getting more of a foothold in the game, a potential game changer, because in that second half, they didn't really have any momentum.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about VAR in general is that whilst it is trying to make it, certain decisions, especially these ones where it should be clear cut, you're either offside or you're not. You're trying to make them as rudimental 100% as possible. Is that at the end of the day, it's a video assistant referee, and that referee at the moment is a human being. It's not robotic or anything like that. So there's still the potential for error. And I think we did see that. He was offside. He was onside, it seems, from that other angle. I guess, it depends what angles they see with VAR. It was different to the penalty decision which is subjective. So you have that dichotomy within VAR where if it's something that is subjective and it's down to the referee's opinion, then the most they can do is an on-field review where he goes over and stares at the telly screen and takes an absolute age. Whereas this one had nothing to do with Clement Turpin, the ref. That's all in the hands of the VAR. He should be able to call that because it should be clear. And the fact that he gets that wrong perhaps shows that, it could be just teething issues, but it also shows that, that there is potential for error. I mean, they are looking at a screen, trying to do it as quickly as possible. I mean, there is the pressure to do it as fast as possible, and maybe that's part of it. Clearly, they haven't seen all the camera angles. That must be the conclusion from it, because when you do see that one angle where it does seem to be, parallel to sight, and the whipped cross comes in, Falcao is level with the ball, potentially even with Lopez's foot after striking it as well. So it was disappointing from Monaco's perspective because, as you were saying, that was a key point in the game. Monaco just started to build a little bit of momentum. They get the goal back there. It's a completely different tie, changes the complexion, and then they're right back in it. Of course, there was that Lopez chance as well, which, in any other day of the week, he probably tucks that away. But I think they'll really feel stunned. I think Falcao came out with some stern comments as well. I think it must be part of the teething process. I think, I don't know. I don't think VAR is going anywhere. I think one of the major issues for me is that I think it was a semi-final between PSG and Rennes where the referee's referrals to VAR and then going over to do on-field reviews with the television screen just led to absolute chaos, and that made it difficult for him to manage. And we didn't see that in this game. I think Turpin did well with it, but it's these sort of teething issues that they've got to get a hand on. And while they're trying to trial all these things, there are trophies on the line. So these are major calls, but I'm not sure. I mean, I wonder what's your stance on VAR? I think, is it a positive thing, do you think?
I love VAR. I will defend VAR to the hill, because the clear thing here wasn't the system itself being an issue. This was the people that were watching the TV cameras having an issue. They clearly didn't. They must have had that angle to hand, and why they wouldn't have had that angle to hand, I don't know. But they clearly made an error in that one. And the thing is, the frustrating thing about that, for me more than anything, is that they got the penalty decision right, and quite clearly right, very quickly as well, and that was really well done. It's just a shame that they've maybe rushed this one. They've maybe not seen the angle, and in the end they've made a little bit of a mistake that puts things like VAR in a bad light. I mean, you can argue more about something like the decision that a lot of people come up with, like the Heung-min Son one for Tottenham a couple of months ago, and the strange wiggly lines against Huddersfield for Manchester United as well. That's the system being a little bit funny and maybe some teething problems. But in all honesty, that's clear human error, and that needs to be sorted out, and something that the French authorities, when they are doing something like VAR, look at and see why that wasn't picked up by the referees that were watching that camera, and why they didn't have that, if they didn't have that camera angle to hand, and quickly why they didn't, because that's the most important one and the clear one that gives them the decision that they needed to make. But hopefully that kind of teething problem will sort of smooth over there, and those kind of mistakes really will help make that a little bit better. But congratulations to Paris Saint-Germain, and I'm sure plenty of their players will be delighted to add that little mini version of the Coupe de la Ligue that you get, trophy that you get to their mantelpiece, and they hopefully will coast to a couple more in their eyes, at least anyway, for the rest of the season really. But back to Ligue 1 matters, because there were some big moments really, especially for those near the bottom of the table, as we start to hit the final few hurdles really. There's only 6 games left coming this weekend at least, and a major result at the bottom of the table to start off with, Peter, and that's Amiens' 1-0 win at Lille, which seemed a little bit eerie watching back on the highlights as well, with the empty stadium and everything like that. But it's a massive result for both teams really, in a sense, because for Amiens, they'd only won 1 game in their last 5, and it was a really big win to take on one of those teams that is in and around the drop zone with them, and put some separating space between the actual automatic zone as well is even more important. But for Lille, a tough game where a lot of their chances really came from Benzia shooting from long range and straight at Baptiste Gürtner, straight down his throat, and then the goal comes from their own throw-in, in Amiens' half, and it's taken off them. Julio, right back, left back, sorry, loses the ball, and Mendoza's in, and a guy thinks about possibly coming over, but he's covering the player, so he kind of ends up standing still, and then Mike Maignan just has it go through his legs, essentially, and then that's the Amiens result for them, and maybe could have nicked another one near the end as well. It's honestly, Peter, a massive result for starting with Amiens, really. That's now put them 6 points ahead of Lille. They were 3 points before the game began. And that is, at this point of the season, really a massive result and a massive points gap for them to take.
Yeah, it's a vital result for Amiens. I think it's even more so when you look at their remaining fixtures. They've still got Lyon, Monaco, PSG, and OM to play. It was absolutely vital that they won this game. I mean, that cushion they've got, 6 points to the automatic, 5 points to the playoff, it will be huge because I mean they've got Caen next, which is a winnable game with their current form, but with those big games to come on the horizon, and they needed to win, and they did, and they were very fortunate, as you were outlining. I think that you could take a lot from the goal they conceded, and with the two respective sides, I think you had a Lille side that was nervous. You know, they've had so many different things thrown at them this season, from Bielsa's illogical nonsense to fans storming the pitch and so forth. And he had that atmosphere, and it just everything seemed to be encapsulated in that one moment. It just sort of the clumsiness of I can't think it was Alonso or whoever's on the ball just stumbling, and then Mendoza nipping in, as you said. Just not sure which way to go. And then obviously for Mike Maignan, who's done relatively okay this season, it's gone for his legs. So and from an Amiens perspective, they weren't particularly spectacular, but they set out with a goal in mind. They were very well organised, nothing spectacular, and they got a bit of luck. And Pellissier would be really pleased with that. And I think Amiens have been one of the sides who've played some really good stuff this season. They've come up from Ligue 2 after back-to-back promotions, and they've been impressive. And at times they've taken the game to sides, and I think it's nice to see that they're doing well. It's not as though they've been through a struggle recently with their recent form, but as you were saying, it's such a massive result, and I think that the way that sides have spread out a little bit will be quite reassuring for them, and knowing that sides like Caen are in free fall will be a boost for them. But they need to get to 40 points. That's probably the target. I think less than that might be enough this season, just judging from how slow the bottom four now are starting to chug forward. But I think for Lille, it'd be so disappointing because they weren't that bad. I think they were the more proactive as they had to be, as they have been of late. But to concede the goal the way they did, and Lynette Günther in really good form in goal for Amiens as well, a couple of good stops, but you need your luck to go your way at this point in the season, and I think that'll be it's a real just everything about that game as well, as you were saying, behind no fans in the stadium because of the pitch invasion. It's all so very worrying for Leo, and you just wonder if Galtier can pull them out of this rut. I mean, if he is talking about his future, I'm pretty sure every player in that dressing room is considering his future, thinking about where they're going to be next season, which obviously plays into family, whatever. All these sort of thoughts are key in a relegation battle like this, but especially the side with a number of bigger players, as you would probably call them, in terms of the contracts and how much they've been signed for and what they're considering. So it's nervous times if you're a Lille fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit of a soul-crushing one, really, because we've mentioned really that result against Monaco, although obviously it ended up going the wrong way, it felt like a positive move forward for them. They got themselves ahead. They weren't really afraid. After that result against Montpellier, you always thought that it could really kill them off, and the problem was in this game it was so quiet at the times, and they looked like they were out of ideas. I mean, I mentioned in the bit I said earlier that when you're having Yassine Benzia as your best player taking pot shots from 20 yards out, there's something wrong really, because he's never been a prolific goal scorer. He's never really been adept at that, and that's exactly the kind of thing in these kind of games against big games, 6-pointers really against teams that you should be beating at home. You can't be having that really. You can't be having that attitude of taking gambles from distance when you can keep passing, keep playing it, and hopefully create a situation where you can try and attempt from closer in. It was just, if that's the best you can muster, then you really have to worry, even if their games are left against Bordeaux, Guingamp, Metz, Toulouse, Dijon at home as well, with Dijon being so poor away from home. You think that there's options for them to still gain points, but then you look at games like this and you're thinking, where are they going to come from? That's ironically, since the Paris Saint-Germain game, that's the first game they've not scored in, but it looked like they could have played all weekend and they wouldn't have scored again. It was a really poor result, and like you say, for Amiens, it's enormous because now they have got 4 really, really difficult games, but they've got 3 against Caen, Strasbourg, and Metz, where if they can pick up 4 points, 6 points. 6 points would be massive, but even 4 points, if you win that game against Metz and maybe take a point from Strasbourg, that's probably them safe now, which is an enormous achievement. I don't think anyone would have seen Amiens staying up this season. I think that the job they've done there, that with the resources they've got and everything like that, I mean, Christophe Pélissier has to take an enormous amount of credit for what he's done for this club. They looked dead and buried from the first couple of months. They weren't winning games. They had a couple of nice results. They had a really good November that set them up quite nicely, but then they started slipping again. But slowly they've grinded out some results. I mean, they've only lost once in the last 6, which is really, really impressive. And given that essentially those games against Lyon, Monaco, PSG, Marseille are free hits, if they can take anything from any of those games, if something seems to happen, that would be an absolutely massive bonus, because you look at teams like Lyon behind them, you look at Troyes as well, another side that struggled at the weekend, and they can't seem to find any kind of semblance of form at the moment. You start to think that Amiens, if they can get like another win under the belt, because it feels like teams like Caen, teams like Angers that are just about a point above them, that if you can get to that 37 point mark, you might just be about safe with the teams below them. So massive credit to them, but Lille are in a real mess. They must be serious, if they weren't before, seriously worried. But another 6-pointer that we had at the weekend was the nice little derby that doesn't come around that very often. It probably won't happen either next season as well, between Strasbourg and Metz, and a feisty one, and a one where we saw two good goals, 2 scrappy goals, a red card each for them, for one crazy foul, one bit of argy-bargy that led to a second booking for the Metz defender as well. It was a feisty little affair, and an interesting game really, because we keep saying it felt like if they could win in this one, that Metz, especially with the results that happened above them as well, that would have been a really big result for them. But it feels like one of the other slow little daggers, almost like I feel like it's a game of pop-up pirate, where we're just sliding slowly the swords into Metz before they pop out and leave us for Ligue 2. But at the moment, and I don't know where that analogy's come from, don't ask. But it feels like they almost got something from this one. They were ahead through Mollet. They had the chances as well. They got at a Strasbourg side that have been really indifferent in the second half of the season, but they couldn't quite force it over the line. And for Strasbourg, at the same time, the frustration will be that they allowed them to do that, and when they did go ahead with 11 minutes to go, they couldn't quite muster the gumption to really go for it and take a win that would have really wrestled the relegation battle back in their favour, and possibly put them even clear of it.
Yeah, it was a great game actually. It's just a shame it's a derby that we may not see for next season, as you're saying. The thing with Metz is, because of the way that the sides above them have just sort of like stumbled forward drunkenly towards safety, I think if you think back to a couple of results later, they picked up a lot of draws. They conceded late against Toulouse. They conceded late against Guingamp. And you just think, a couple of results either way, and suddenly we're looking at a completely different complexion. And again, here, they've conceded late and not been able to see out and take home the vital 3 points. I think I know we've written them off frequently all season, but it does look like curtains for them. It's a big point for Strasbourg. I think the momentum you can generate from derbies is key. It's a great finish from Seka, absolute thunder blaster to nick the point, and it's an entertaining spectacle as well. A couple of red cards, Thierry Loret getting very animated on the touchline. I think Metz went ahead through a penalty that wasn't a penalty. I think we were talking about VAR earlier. That wasn't quite useful for. It didn't hit Bakary Kone's hand. I think it was Riviere's hand. I can't remember. No.
I'm still so surprised that the ref spotted that one. There was such a conglomerate of people in that moment that if it could have hit anything, I think it probably hit about 3 hands that he didn't even do it. But yeah, a strange one.
But yeah, so it's a good point for Strasbourg. I think they would have wanted to have pulled clear a little bit more. But for Metz, there's a lot of what might have been. I mean, their season has been wretched, and obviously their start was appalling. But at times it seemed like they could, and perhaps maybe they'll think they should have pulled themselves a little bit close to contention. I mean, they are 7 points off. They do have Lille, Angers, and Amiens to play, so potentially there's some room for them to come back. But they've been some really good performers of late. Like if you look at Mollet, who's on the score sheet again, he's been impressive. Riviere's done okay. Roux hit his form, but it's fallen away a little bit. There is that what might have been, but for Strasbourg, they were that exciting outfit before, and I think this game sort of rekindles that a little bit. But they have really struggled of late. They haven't been able to find that same rhythm. Martin Terrier, for one, has really not performed anywhere near the standard that he was playing before he agreed his deal to join Lyon, and that's been a major blow for them. I mean, they've been reliant on goals from Bahoken, who wasn't in the pitch at the start of the season. So it's an important result. I think defensively they've got so many concerns, and I think if they can somehow avoid shipping too many in their run-in, then they should be okay. I think there are sides worse than them, and I think the advantage of Le Mans now is really, really important. And you contrast that with, say, Lille, and obviously they've now got a stadium ban, but the difference in atmosphere can really push you over the line. So I think that bodes well for them. But yeah, it's a great game, really entertaining. It's a shame for Metz. It's another what if.
Yeah, it's a frustrating one, isn't it? Because I would have really liked to see this derby again next season, but I suppose the only way we're really going to see that is they both tumble into Ligue 2. But yeah, I think it's still for Strasbourg. It'll be frustrating that they couldn't win this one, much like it was frustrating they couldn't win the one the week prior against Toulouse as well, but before the international break, I should say, in fact. But the positive for them is there's games left, obviously, but this Angers, Saint-Etienne, Amiens, Nice, Rennes, Lyon, Nantes, it feels like there's games within that they're not too difficult. I mean, you're facing Lyon, but at home, so that's a positive, and they've been good against the bigger sides this season. They face Nice and Saint-Etienne, who are both playing better recently, but again, because they're both home games, that does really help. And facing teams like Amiens and Angers, who are still around them, opportunities to win. The game against Nantes, we will talk a little bit about them in a moment as well, because they're in not great form. They seem to have already switched off, and in the last game of the season, if they're not fighting for that 5th spot or are out of the running for that, which they probably will be at this rate anyway, that's a great chance for them to pick up points at the very end, at least for them. It just feels like they could have been sealed, and it could have been a little bit more. I think it will be the poor form of those below them, especially those 3 clubs, Metz, Lille, and Troyes, are currently really in the mire that they won't really be in any kind of real trouble come the end of the season in the end. But it does feel a shame for Metz. They've been very valiant in this sort of second half of the season, and they've put up a real fight. And unless some kind of miracle really happens now, I know we've mentioned that the Great Escape could have been happening a couple of times, but it does feel like unless they can build something before those games against Lille, Angers, Amiens, because they might be irrelevant by then, they might already be down essentially. So let's hope that they can maybe put something crazy up against Lyon and Rennes, and we still have one last fight of the Titans really for the Met side that have at least given us something when they gave us pretty much nothing in the first half of the season, at least anyway. I just want to briefly, Peter, talk about a couple of other sides below there. I mean, it's pretty poor for most of the sides around there. Troyes lost, Toulouse lost, Caen lost as well. Angers, unfortunately for them, obviously it counted their PSG game from the couple of weeks ago before the international break where they played that stranger midweek game. But for Troyes and Toulouse, two pretty poor results that kind of keeps them in the mire. But it's an interesting one next week for everyone, because for those bottom six, Amiens, Strasbourg, Toulouse, Troyes, Lille and Metz, none of them play each other. So this is quite an interesting weekend, really, because none of them will sort of fight each other out, at least anyway. Strasbourg at least have someone maybe like Angers that's a little bit safe for them. But this weekend is an interesting one because, Peter, with them not facing each other, it could be a little bit of a battle royale, really. Teams will be looking at TV screens, really, especially teams like, most of them are in the multiplex, to be fair, other than Metz, which is even better for them. So there'll be people on the sidelines probably looking at monitors, thinking how the other games are going. It'd be an interesting little multiplex, a little bit of an extra to the multiplex, at least anyway. But an interesting weekend for them where you can't take points off of anyone else. Time to try and get them yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, it takes away that cup final edge to games, not having that, and that will, well, you still have that pressure. So we'll see how they fare. I think the one exception for me is Amiens v Caen. I think that is equally a relegation struggle, just in terms of how Caen's form has just completely capitulated. I mean, they had that terrible run into December, where I think it's like 1 win in 9, and then in 2018 they just haven't been able to bring themselves back to life. Three straight defeats now. They've only won 3 times this year. They're showing really worrying signs. And against Montpellier, the game was done within about 29 minutes, and you just wonder, with their fixtures to come, they've got to play all the sides below them. They're 35 points. They're 6 points clear of the playoff. They'll definitely be looking over their shoulders. And with Amiens, they'll be boosted from that Lille result. They'll be determined to, secure their safety. I think that could be a really big game of the lot. But more generally, I think, as you were saying, I think for the other side, for a lot of them, it's a free hit in a way. Metz, I think, against Lyon, that's almost done. Strasbourg, Angers, that'll be a tight game. Angers were closer to their safety, but they're not secure either. And I think also Dijon will put up a stern fight for Toulouse, who, have come back to life under De Bev. I mean, they were poor against Lyon. They didn't offer very much at all going forward. But I think, as you were saying, I think it offers a different dynamic this weekend as to what we can look for. But yeah, I think Patrice Guérin and Caen have really got to be sitting on the edge of their seats a little bit, in terms of, you need to hurry up and wake up. I mean, the goals they conceded were poor, especially the second one from a set piece. And that's against Montpellier, sorry. So, there are some, I think in Bordeaux, you're looking at that 37-point mark. I think Bordeaux will be fine, but there are some sides that really are struggling for form, and that will make a difference when you're playing them. I think Lille will smell bloody when they go to the Map Atlantique to play Poyet's Bordeaux. So, there are points to be taken this weekend, that's for sure. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on Caen especially?
They're sinking, aren't they, a little bit? I think it's been a strange season for them, and a strange season for, it seems like Caen every season. It seems like a strange season, but they have really dipped over the last couple of weeks. Really, 3 straight losses really stamp the authority on that. But at the same time, they have these games where, like their last win back in March against Strasbourg, where they were the better side for a long period of it. The draw against Rennes, I remember watching and thinking that, again, they were good for long periods of that, probably deserved to win. They were good against Nantes a couple of weeks before that. They do seem to pick up the odd win every so often that has kept them afloat. And I think that, especially in the looking at their next 4 games, really, Amiens, Toulouse, Metz and Troyes, they're going to get picked 3 points from one of those games. And I think that probably just about saves them. Again, they're another team, the qualities below them have probably done them enough. And the fact that they have been in poorer form, they have played all the sides above them, at least anyway. So getting 3 points for them will probably just about do it, because that'll make them on 38. And you think, looking at Dijon now, you cannot imagine Dijon or Guingamp being involved in any shape or form. So getting to that points tally will just about see them through. I can't imagine they'll see the rest of the season through as losing. So I think they're probably just about safe. But it is obviously an opportunity, I think, for a team, well, for any team really, but for a team like Amiens who know as well the same, that a victory for them probably just about does it as well. It's a great opportunity and an interesting one for the weekend for both of them, because they'll feel like they can maybe think about next season if they can win that one. On to a team that's really gone under the radar really in the last couple of seasons, well, last couple of weeks at least anyway, because I wasn't aware of this, but it's been somewhat of a quiet turnaround at Saint-Etienne, who are now unbeaten in 9 under Jean-Louis Gasset, and punctuated with that 3-0 win away to Nantes at the weekend, where they really dominated the game, really, which it seems strange to think about, that the Saint-Etienne team that really dipped in the first half of the season and weren't great in January either, but like I say, unbeaten in 9. That's with 5 victories and 4 draws, which maybe balances it out a little bit more. But when I do say the draws are against Marseille, Lyon, Dijon and Rennes, you'd say 2 of those are commendable draws, and one a team around them in Rennes where you say, especially away from home, you take a point. But they've kept 2 clean sheets recently. They're not conceding as many. They've find some goals in this one with Remy Cabella setting up a goal and scoring twice himself as well. Peter, they quietly gone about their business, but they've turned things around and are even now looking at possibly fighting for that 5th place position as well, which is almost unfathomable. Even about about a month ago, you would have never even thought about that being the issue.
Yeah, they've turned things around quite spectacularly, really. I think if we think back to the 5-1 at Lyon, the crowd trouble, the mess that ensued after Garcia left, Sablé experiment, everything seemed to be falling apart. And we were talking about Saint-Etienne in the relegation struggle. They were one of the sides down there in the mire, very much in the mix. And because it was so tight, they've just been able to pull themselves clear. And now, looking at it, they're 3 points off 5th, which is, it's absolutely extraordinary. And I think a lot of it is due to what they did in January, not just in terms of the players they brought in, but in terms of the mentality change. I think that really has helped. I think it's also epitomised by Mathieu Debuchy, obviously formerly of Arsenal, who has just completely come to life and has got his eyes set firmly on that right back spot in the France squad. And you wouldn't hold it against him based on his current form. He's scored 3 times now since he's rejoined. But him, Subotic as well, another big name's come in, and Villa, another well-known name in French football from his time at Rennes, and then Tep. And we talked about those names, and I mean, while they all individually haven't necessarily, with the exception maybe of Debuchy, and Villa's done quite well, they haven't exactly set the league alight. It's just that, I think, that boost that they needed, and they've turned that into really good form. And Cabella put in a really good display against Nantes, and I mean, he's had a very quiet season. Another Newcastle connection, of course, and a couple of goals, an assist. The second goal was really well taken finish as well. It just shows that confidence is starting to, spread through the ranks, and Bamba's looking good. We're almost getting that early season Bamba that we saw before that contract dispute that sort of derailed him a little bit. So, and yeah, they're on the best run since 2015, I think, is what I read. So that's really, really impressive stuff. And because it is so tight, they're on 42 points. It's 45 points for Montpellier in 5th, along with Rennes and Nice. And you'd fancy them potentially to certainly be involved in that. Not sure what's happened to Nantes. Since the turn of the year, they've been poor. They had that great start, didn't they? And it's just the fine margins of Ranieri, where it's on one side it can be brilliant, but it's not far away from being abject as well. They've got Salah missing sitters for fun. It's a little bit concerning for them. And I mean, they were comfortable in 5th, and they've allowed all these sides, the chasing pack, to catch them. It's like the condensed side of the table has just shifted upwards. So with Nantes in free fall, I mean, Nice certainly are a threat now. I mean, they're in great form, and so are Rennes and Montpellier, to be fair. I think they're all in good form with the exception of Nantes. So it won't be easy for them to sneak into those European places. But the fact that we're even mentioning them in the same breath it's really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I can't believe some of the things that were happening. Really, I mean, they were attacking at times in this game. I had to adjust my eyes and make sure I needed to wear glasses and stuff like that. It was crazy, especially in the third goal. They had a 4-on-3 at one point. It was really, really good to see them be a little bit more vivacious with their football, and that seems to be growing with the confidence they're gaining from winning games. Some of them honestly have been a bit scrappy. A couple of goals from Neven Subotic in recent games have pushed them across the line, really. But in this one, Cabela was great, creative, and scored a couple of goals and did those things that we remember from Montpellier, especially the arriving late at the box. That third goal was really, really reminiscent of his time there of scoring from long range when the defenders would back off him and he would curl one into the bottom corner with expert precision. It was a really excellent display. And like you say, Bamba, Hamouma, they were all just had an extra energy to them. They wanted to play football. They wanted to get forward. And the midfield of Selnesh and Villa were winning the ball and using it and creating and being positive with the defending. They were moving forward, and it just lifted everything from them. And I know it helped playing a Nantes side that look like on their beach already, and they were really, really poor in this one. There was a clip of a couple of attempted touches by Emiliano Sala that was a very nice watch. It again, Bambi on ice always seems to come to mind, at least anyway. But they just have a different energy about them. They didn't have, even at the start of the season when we were positive on them, they weren't as authoritative in their play and have a belief in just going on the front foot and being on the front foot and creating their own chances. Because this kind of team looks a million times better. It looks like they can do something. It looks like a team that you can build around if they can sign Romy Capella permanently, if they can bring in some of these loan players on solid deals. They have a team to build around now and a structure and something like that. And I know we all kind of derided Jean-Louis Gasset being in charge, thinking that his time at Montpellier last season proved that he really wasn't ready, or really wasn't up to this level anymore. But he's proved us wrong. I don't know if he will stay on as manager from the end of the season for next season, but if he doesn't, he's given a real great basis for someone creative and young to come on and do something with this team, because he's really turned them around and they look a much, much better prospect for it, especially for next campaign. They'll be delighted they're nowhere near the bottom. They'll be absolutely ecstatic that they might be potentially getting a Europa League place, but at the same time, like a few sides around there, they might be hoping they reserve that a little bit to stay off a little bit. But we shall wait and see if they keep doing something like that. But credit to them, they've been much better in recent weeks. It's time for our Plane to Russia segment today, and the player I've chosen for us to discuss this evening is Eintracht Frankfurt forward Sebastian Haller, who's had a really good season in Germany. He's first in the league, having been in the Eredivisie with Utrecht for a couple of seasons. A little bit of an unknown quantity to some people, even in French football. And Peter, obviously, because he came from Auxerre and Ligue 2 football, and that's probably a smite on him with his background on there and in Eredivisie and not scoring many goals necessarily this season, despite his impressive performances. That's maybe something that is at the moment holding him back from international football.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, there are a number of players who seem to have slipped out of the net. I mean, because of the wealth of talent that seems to be in French football at the moment. You've got players like Haller and Lenglet. I think he's gone to Sevilla, and then you've got Pavard as well, who has made that jump from a Bundesliga side to as a relative unknown to now. Because he's very much in contention to earn himself a spot on Deschamps' flight to Moscow. So, I think there are that's just hidden gems everywhere in Europe now that are French, and Haller is definitely one of them. I think that being out of the limelight hasn't helped him in that sense. I think for me, he's still a player who's it's a bit too soon to consider him pushing for a starting berth when you consider the wealth of talent France have got. But yeah, he's certainly an option, and I think we talk about the kind of player he is. He's a target man. He's very good with his back to goal. And that's the kind of thing that gets Didier Deschamps going. That keeps him warm at night. Those ideas of a big target man like the Olivier Giroud mold, and he's also got a few worldies in him. There's a brilliant goal he scored against Stuttgart this season that Bundesliga fans, I'm sure, will rave about. And I mean, he's played for a Frankfurt side that have done quite well by most accounts, I think, pushing for Champions League. I think the step up to the Bundesliga was a bit tough for him in terms of his goal scoring turn, but he's still chipping in with goals. I mean, he was prolific in the Netherlands, but that's not difficult. We can see from Memphis Depay's transition that it takes time to really adapt to a different level and a different way of playing the game. And I think that's certainly the case with Ale. I think for me, it's a bit too soon, but I will hear your arguments for why he should go.
Well, I will preface this with being I'm a pretty big fan of Sebastian Haller. He's my kind of forward, really, and won't surprise many that I like a big burly centre forward, and don't take that the wrong way. But I know. I just think there's a couple of things here with Sebastian Haller, and I'll start my argument really with his football, which is the most important thing, really, and the argument that he's obviously been at Utrecht, and why didn't Liga clubs look at him when he was at Auxerre is fair enough. I thought he did really well. I think the positive thing that he's done at Utrecht, and he's continued it at Eintracht Frankfurt, is not necessarily the goals he scores, because he does score really good goals, and it is for his height and his strength as well. He's really good with the ball at his feet as a finisher, but not just that. He adds something, bringing other players in. I mean, you look at the goals that Kevin Prince Boateng has scored this season for them, and the amount of times that Ale has been involved in that, and Rebic next to him, and the other Serbian forward, his name escapes me now. I think it's
Jovic.
Yeah, Luka Jovic, that's it. Yeah, he's been, especially recently, very good for Eintracht as well. And the fact that he brings those kind of players into the game, he holds the ball up excellently, and he lays it off. And I think it's that factor that convinces me that he would be an interesting option for France, a younger option than Olivier Giroud, a more consistently played option. Obviously, with Giroud being mainly really a sub for Chelsea, but even as an option, if they are going to start, as we expect, really, with Deschamps, that Olivier Giroud being the top front man, you would expect that you maybe need cover in that area. And I don't think in any way French footballers in Spain, in France, in England, I don't think there's anyone in that Giroud mould other than Sebastian Haller. And
Emmanuel Riviere at Metz,
Nolan Roux, surely. That would be the first choice. He scored much more goals than mine. But in all honesty, and he's still very young, he's still only 23, 24, and he is growing in confidence every day, and playing more Bundesliga football has sort of rounded him out a little bit more. And I expect him to probably kick on again next season, which will be another point that maybe he might be someone for the European Championship squad, maybe for 2020. But if he continues how he is, and if Deschamps feels like he needs an option that will be someone like Giroud, then I think he should be an option. But let's be honest now. Peter, does he make the plane?
No, he doesn't make the plane. But I do take your points. I think there would be a really good shot. Don't think Deschamps would be willing to risk the wrath of taking two players of the Giroud mould. But if Giroud gets injured, you are looking around, and Deschamps does want that alternative option. He's all about options in terms of his squad. It's rather than talent necessarily. It's about what they can offer. We go back to the Fekir thing. Fekir is very much one thing, whereas in Payet, he can offer multiple things, which is why you get Payet favoured a little bit. And Sissoko's perennial existence in the squad was because of that. And take away Giroud out the squad, and you throw in a Lacazette. Does he offer anything different really to the options that France already have? Not necessarily. So. As an outside bet, he's actually thinking about it, and he does actually have that going for him. And I think if Deschamps wants to gamble, then potentially he could get there. But I think it's all reliant on Giroud becoming a cropper essentially. But no, he doesn't make my plane.
Yeah, I don't think he makes the plane either. I would love him to go because I think he's an interesting option. I actually think he might be a more interesting option than Giroud, but he's not been tested at this level enough, which is shame. It would have been nice to be maybe give him these friendlies at least just to see how he would work, and much like he did with Wissam Ben Yedder, but it wasn't to be really. And I think that's the final straw for a lot of players that we might talk about later on as well. Well, in future episodes, that they might have sort of missed the boat, unfortunately, which is also why we're talking about them. But I think he's certainly someone he'll keep an eye on for the European Championships one. We're thinking that Giroud will be by that point, 32, 33, that you're starting thinking it's his international career. Well, he'll be even more than that. He's 31 now. So he'll be sort of 33 by the time that the tournament turns around, and almost turning 34 because his birthday's in September, that he might not be really someone eligible for them to try and use in 2020. So maybe Haller is that new option to be the central striker and the big man in the very speedy, creative era of French international football. But I think Russia might be a couple of years too early, at least anyway. But let's do our Ligue 1 snapshots to finish off with, and I'll obviously start with you, Peter. What's your Ligue 1 snapshot?
Well, first I'll go with two quickly. One is, you touched on the intro. I think it's the absence of Mondonda and Rami as well for their running. I think they're so important. We've talked all season about how important he's been, but especially Mondonda, I'm talking about here, that core of Marseille players who seem to make them tick over, and the amount of times they've relied on him making fantastic saves. I think he's out for about 6 weeks, which is a massive, massive blow. And Rami's also out for the Europa League games against Leipzig, so they will be sorely missed for them. Of course, Johan Pelle's coming in, and he was outstanding last season, so it's not like they're short of options, but his influence on the field, I think, will be a sore miss. And the other one, quickly, was Thierry Henry, just going back to the Metz-Strasbourg derby. After Seca's fantastic equaliser where he smashed it home, Thierry Henry, because there was scuffles after the second red card between the benches, he's turned to the Mets bench and just stuck 2 fingers up. That's the image. There's an image of him doing that. They made up at the end, him and the Mets contingent. But talk about taking the derby to heart. I mean, that'll be one that the fans will enjoy, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll endear him more to the fans, at least at Strasbourg. I've also got 2 because I know, unfortunately, Rich couldn't join us this evening. He's feeling a little bit under the weather, but I know his would definitely have been Clément Grenier's free kick for Guingamp. It's his first free kick goal since 2015, and it's great to see him back fit and playing football for first and foremost, but for him to do what he does best, and that's score terrific goals like that. I do hope that he can maybe, after this half a season he's had and a good pre-season, can maybe find another home at Guingamp and show us again how good he can be. But that was a little flash of the brilliance that Clément Grenier had when he was at Lyon and getting linked with the teams across Europe. But it was really nice to see something like that. I think my last snapshot will be what was on our Twitter feed earlier this evening. If you've not seen it already, head on over there as well, because there's some really, really great stuff from France football about our favourite crazy boy in French football, and that's Hatem Ben Arfa, who did a number of things in his turmoilous time at Paris Saint-Germain so far that will be ending at the end of the season. It seems everything's pointed to there. He's mentioned it on his Instagram as well. But just to read some experts as well that's been on our Twitter feed today, Hatem Ben Arfa told Unai Emery in the spring of 2017, after Barcelona's win and return back to victory, that he would never pass the quarterfinals of the Champions League, even with the best team in the world. He's also mentioned that he is also known to do little imitations of the PSG manager, attempts to speak French for the other players that they've thoroughly enjoyed. Dani Alves requested that to the sporting director and to Maxwell to reinstate him, which was because of how good he was in training, but without success. Again, these are all according to France football. After the end of a training session in April 2017, Hatem Ben Arfa joked to the Emir of Qatar, Al Thani, about how he was more accessible than the president, El Khalifi, which had been dodging meetings with the Frenchman. He wasn't particularly happy with that, and has ensured Ben Arfa hasn't played for Paris Saint-Germain again. Obviously, he's announced on his Twitter account that he's his contract ends in this summer. He's been thinking about how to celebrate his birthday on the 5th of April, so in a couple of days, so keep your eyes on his Instagram feed for that, because he's attempted to bring everyone pizza in the PSG dressing room to provoke the club staff. Just a nice person he is. In autumn 2016 training session, Unai Emery said the following to Hatem Ben Arfa after a latter was being particularly selfish: stop taking yourself to Messi. You're not Messi. 5 months following his arrival, PSG director of football Patrick Kluivert told Hatem Ben Arfa, "You have to leave. The manager doesn't want you. We found you a club, Fenerbahce. You'll see Turkey is a good league." Ben Arfa ignored him. He also ignored an offer from Nice in the summer, which was Ben Arfa and money for Jean-Michel Seri. Everything was agreed. Mario Balotelli was trying to recruit him, but Ben Arfa said no. Classic Ben Arfa stuff. It's been nice to hear about him again, and all the antics he's seemingly got up to in Paris Saint-Germain in his 2 years of non-football, at least anyway. And maybe we might see a renaissance in him in French football next season, or he might go to China. He might, wherever it takes him again. I'm sure many of us will follow, but that's all we have time for this week, at least on Ben Arfa cast, as it should be called now, at least anyway. My thanks to Peter and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show right here on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.